Picture looks pretty good too. Maybe I should do more videos outdoors. All right, so today I want to talk about rotate device. All right, let's see how this goes. Maybe it's this way. If the angle's bad, my bad. All right, so let me jump into it. I want to talk about toxic parents, toxic families. Um, I think this is a very important topic. And I was thinking about this right now to make this video because I was thinking about um, a Bible character that I don't hear too much preachers talking about. Okay, when you think about like a individual that God uses who was neglected, rejected, and looked over, the two people that come to mind are first Joseph and then David. But the person I want to talk about today is Benjamin. Because although, Joseph, he comes very close. And you could say that technically his selling into Egypt was a forfeiting of his life. But of all of them, Benjamin's father, Saul, is the only one I could think of that actually made a attempt on his life. A father that makes an attempt on his son's life. Remember when Benjamin was sitting at the table and King Saul was asking, "Where's David?" And David and Benjamin already talked about it because Benjamin wasn't too sure whether or not his father wanted to kill David. And so Benjamin tells his father he gave David a leave of absence, and then David hurled a spear at him. And then he calls him these names. You can just tell by the language, the outburst of his anger. And how don't you know that you're giving your kingdom away to another person? I think he equivalently calls him "you son of a bad word," with the terminology that he uses. So we got Benjamin, and we know that Benjamin feared the Lord, right? Because there's a story in which they were camped against their enemies for war, and the children of Israel hid in holes. I love when Benjamin said, and he went with his armor bearer, he said, "We know that God can deliver with plenty and with a little. So let us go up. Perhaps God will give us the victory." So him and his armor bearer, two men, put an entire army at flight. Because he moved in faith, God responded. So Benjamin feared the Lord, but he had a toxic father who wanted to murder his best friend and who even made an attempt on his life, whom, because of King Saul, Benjamin died a premature death. For they were surrounded by the Philistines, and Saul and Benjamin fell that day. Another example I want to throw out, just to hone in on how foolish King Saul was when he said, "If anyone touch of this honey, or if anyone eat today, they shall be killed." And Benjamin later on said that was a foolish decision because he found some honey and it lightened his eyes. And so it's just an example of the irritability and rash decision making of King Saul. He was a self-absorbent, narcissistic, toxic, prideful individual. So prideful that he even came against God, because God told him through Samuel, "The kingdom has been ripped away from you." But still he tried to defy the will of God by slaying God's chosen man, by attempting to slay God's chosen man, which is King David. Even at times he acknowledged that surely you are God's anointed, because David spared his life. But still, he wanted David killed. How do you get more toxic than this person? How do you become more narcissistic than this person? And I've seen this, because when Saul was called, he was a humbled man. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him. He was chosen from the tribe of Benjamin, the least family of the tribe. When he was anointed king, they went looking for him because he was hiding. But how often we see people, when God elevates them, the materialism and the status. It corrupts their hearts, it corrupts their soul, and they become a totally different person. The person you in high school when he was broke is totally different than the person you know now that he's living in a certain house and driving a certain car. And money has a way of changing people. Money, possessions have a way of changing even families and parents. And it may not even be their coming up in life, but it could be your coming up in life. You try to take a few steps forward in life, a few steps forward in your economic development, they pull you back down with the gimme spirit, kind of like the crab mentality. You just can't get ahead because they're always asking for stuff, and they're happy with you. They're happy with you until you say no, because they're greedy, because they're self-centered, because they're narcissists, because they're toxic. So what can we learn from Benjamin in his relationship to his father? I think when it comes to Old Testament Bible characters, we have to be discerning as to the decisions they make, to learn from their decisions, whether to replicate them or to avoid them. So when it comes to Benjamin, because of his relations to his father and his duty as a warrior in the army of his father, he died a premature death. So how can we as saints avoid premature death? Because of the toxic people in our lives that we can't necessarily cut off all the time, such as Benjamin and King Saul. I think Benjamin knew who his friends were. He knew who to put his trust in. First, the Lord, and his friend, who also feared the Lord, David, known as a man after God's own heart. Why does God put people like this in these types of families? I think it's because humble people tend to come from these types of situations. You look at Joseph, you look at David, you look at Benjamin. They all came out of these toxic, even Jacob with Laban. They came out of these toxic relationships, but God used it to give them an insight and perspective on life that they may not reflect the toxicity and narcissism of the people that they witness it in, the people closest to them. So I think one of the lessons is God put us in the certain families He have us in, that we may grow up humbled before Him, the black sheep of the family, but to be God's chosen one in His family. A humble and contrite heart, He says He won't refuse. I wonder if God allows. Okay, all right, daddy duties, daddy duties. Yes, Jim. What your water? All right, I'll get you more water. Okay. Yeah. That we may grow up humble before Him. Man, that sun is beaming. That we may grow up. Number two. Daddy. Yes. I had a phone. How about this? When I'm done making my video, I'll give you the phone. Sounds good? Yeah. Oh, so my kids just remind me of number two. That also that you may learn how not to be when you have your own family, when you have your own kids. You know, that parent that speak with the anger in their heart, with the anger in their tone, that you may learn because you recognize how it affects you, that you may not reflect that on your spouse and on your kids. Granted, the Lord knows we're human, but we know what we ought not to be among those who have been at the receiving end of such a type of person. Another thing I like to say about David is not David, but Benjamin, is that he trusted God unto death. He was so humble that he was willing to give his kingdom away to his best friend because Benjamin didn't serve the sword, he didn't serve the throne, he served the God Most High. So if you serve God, um, God is going to bring you what He has destined to give you. Whatever God has for you is for you. So just as what God had for David, Saul couldn't take it away. So what God has for you, no matter what situation you're in, whether it's a toxic family member or boss. Oh, I've had my share of toxic bosses. No matter how much of a delay you think it may be, but in God's calendar, there are no delays. And God has everything coming to fruition according to His plan and according to His timing. What's important is that you learn the lesson. You allow your heart to be transformed and molded. And little girl, I'm not done yet. Transformed and molded into the type of person God wants you to be in this world as you run your race before Him. God bless. I am out.